Okay, everybody, we're back one day later. One of the best boxing weekends I've had. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday fights. Gotta love that. Dakota, how are you feeling?
Feeling good, man. And like you said, it was nice to have such a rewarding fight card, at least specifically for me, the PBC card. A lot of great matchups on that. Fantastic performances. Probably I would say the biggest event so far of 2025. And you know, I thought it was great.
Yeah, that was always like the big thing. Remember a few years ago, it was like PBC does events. That was like always the main talking point. The big takeaway for me is Benavidez is obviously a pound for pound fighter with this win. He's now beaten David Morrell. He's beaten Caleb Plant and Demetrius Andrade. That is arguably as good as
Don't forget
anyone.
Vosdick.
And don't forget Bostic, who could have been a world champion as well, but ran into Benavidez. And that's actually probably been his toughest fight in recent memory that he's had to take on. What observations from the fight, and what do you think of Benavidez after this fight?
I mean, clearly, bro, he's just a handful. He's going to set a pace and a tempo, and there's going to be a certain level of offensive foot pressure and volume that a lot of guys are just not going to be able to handle. I think you saw, for the most part, Morrell couldn't handle it, right? He was really good about coming back with his bursts to keep himself competitive in the fight, but it was ultimately Benavidez pushing the tempo. I think one thing I'm noticing as maybe this is just a recent development stylistically. Maybe this is him moving up in weight, but I've noticed that he has become a little bit more one punch at a time. And I'm talking about Benavidez. He keeps that tempo really high, but what he's doing now is he's just sitting down on individual shots. And I think some of what used to make him special was his speed and his combination punching ability. And I just wonder, obviously this is a fantastic performance, but if you're trying to go individual shots with Beterbiev, or really even with Bivol, just with how much movement he has, I think that's a style that is not going to serve him. But and maybe he did a little bit of that of Vosdick, but at the end of the day, man, he just hits so hard. He's got a good enough defense where he's not taking a ton of punishment on the way in. And like we said on the preview show, they just made a good fight, and it wasn't complicated, and there wasn't a lot of bullshit, and I love that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think also maybe that's his adjustment at the elite level of the sport currently, is to throw fewer shots, because when you throw a lot of shots, you're open to get hit. You're open to get hit clean, susceptible to big shots. So maybe one of the adjustments from Benavidez currently is just, I'm going to throw big shots, look to time. I mean, to me, the big thing in this fight, and it's going to sound like a broken record, was experience. It was clear as day that to me, it was 2-2, 3-1 Morrell after 4 rounds. I know you had it a different way. And then Benavidez basically took over till the 10th round. There was like a whole period where it looked to me as though Morrell had won a lot of fights based on his power and his athleticism and controlling a pace. And that 5 through 10, he had never fought a fighter. It felt like he had never gained the experience on how to win a fight with someone that's going to weaponize pace in that manner.
Well, he's never had somebody press him like that either, because I think the threat of his power has also been enough to make guys just be a little bit more careful when they get in the ring with him. And of course, Benavidez has none of that.
Yeah, it was an interesting fight. Like, I feel like it didn't really hurt Morrell. I think Morrell just had looked so spectacular. We wanted to see him in good fights, and he basically had to fight one of the best guys, if not the best guy, to get a fight like this, right? There wasn't like a middle class for him to fight because he'd kind of looked too good. It's like a Glacius now in super middleweight. He's looking too good, so he's got to kind of prematurely take a title shot or a number one contender, because the guys that are the good step up are probably going to be too well managed to take a chance with him. I'm so impressed with Benavidez currently, because he made a 50-50 fight look somewhat easy. It wasn't easy, but he made it look like a fight where people are going to just, Monday morning quarterback, oh, I knew Morrell was going to lose to Benavidez. Like, that's what he did.
Benavidez is also one of those guys. He's making it look easy, but it's not easy. And you could see by how banged up his face was at the end of the fight. You could see by, the swelling on his eye that there wasn't anything easy about it, and that he himself had to take, some punishment from a really good athletic puncher on the way in. And it was also the first time we've seen him buzzed. I mean, I can't remember seeing him buzzed before. I think it was in the 4th round, right? He got clipped and his legs went for a second. You know what I mean? And so while he's making it look easy, nothing easy about it.
Yeah, because to me, the first round I thought Morrell won, the 3rd round I thought he won, and then I thought he buzzed Benavidez and won the 4th. And then really I didn't give him a round to the 11th possibly. It's there was just the issue with Morrell was it's almost like he started too quick and then he didn't have a way to pace himself in those mid rounds. And I can only attribute that to experience or fighting guys where his power kind of overtook him.
It's also a little bit maybe of a lack of game plan. It looked like, he had this feeling of I'm super talented, I'm going to figure it out. And there was some really good things he's doing throughout the fight, again, to keep himself competitive and kind of relevant. But it looked like there was a lacking in a big picture.
Yeah, it was the thing I've never gotten to do in my life. I'm super talented guy, so I'm just going to go in there and wing it. I've done bad job interviews where I just showed up and thought hey, let's just wing it. And I just leave and I'm I'm totally not getting that job. Yeah, I that's the most unrelatable thing for me. It's I feel like my elite attribute is overworking and grinding. I've never been someone where it's dude, I got this. Things just come naturally. I'm the head of the class. So when I see a guy just kind of go high guard and just let a fearsome volume puncher punch him, it is a little infuriating with how the fight started to watch a guy be you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just let Benavidez punch on me.
Well, I think that's how it started. And then by the time he took enough body punishment, it started to, and then he hurts him and he's not really able to do anything with it. I think the punishment started to add up where then instead of I can take it, you start to just become okay with it because you don't have the legs to move out of the way. You know what I mean? It's that thing where I've sort of accepted that I'm just taking this on the high guard now. And that's part of what Benavidez does so well is he sets that tempo to where, you're going to just kind of have to accept your fate unless you're able to really change the course of the fight.
Yeah, I hear you. Trajectories for both guys. Benavidez to me in the conversation for fighter of the year. Obviously, he fought in February. I think realistically, if all things were equal, he'd get 3 fights this year. I think that's probably asking too much. I think if we get 2 Benavidez's fights, that would be a strong year. I really hope we see him in with Beterbiev or Bivol at the end of the year. That would just be such a fantastic fight. But I think he's now in the conversation to be the fighter of the year. To me, Morrell didn't really lose a lot. If anything, I think now guys will fight him. A fight with Caleb Plant's a good fight, McCumbee, a lot of these guys,
But is he going to go back down?
Oh, I guess I keep forgetting these guys are light heavyweight. So, I mean, I think that when I was doing the post-fight show, a name like Jesse Hart to me is an interesting fight for Morrell. A name like Gvozdyk is an interesting name because that's another underlying thing of this too is these guys were huge punchers at super middleweight. They're still good, solid punchers, and you see the effects of their shots. But I think we're also trying to figure out just how hard they hit at this weight class.
Sure. And I think maybe that's somewhere where particularly in a matchup with Beterbiev, where we know just that stylistically that David's going to come forward and that's going to be a little bit of a car crash. It's hard for me to believe that, he's going to be able to take the same kind of shots from Beterbiev that he took from Morrell and make it through the fight. And again, as he becomes a little bit more one shot at a time, there's potential that him and Beterbiev are just trading hard shots. I'm not sure if that would serve him in that kind of matchup.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a you go, I go temperament to this fight. Guys were playing the hits. Okay, I'm going to do my thing. You do my thing. Those first 3 rounds were awesome, though. They were taking chances. They were selling out. They were punching with each other. But as the fight got grueling and the punches started to mean something, there was a you go, I go. I want to talk about my guy Chase Greatness in the chat, jumping in. We've never had him here. Thank you for joining in. Yoenli Hernandez, a guy I think could beat David in the future. Maybe could beat him now. Hernandez better than Morrell, in my opinion. Never mind, he's a middleweight. I didn't know that. But I guess I just wanted to throw in Yoenli Hernandez, who was a prelim guy that we didn't even watch. In the chat, they're talking about our guy, Yoenli Hernandez. Do you have any observation of him?
I was super impressed with him. I was surprised at how aggressive he was. You know, we've talked about kind of the new school of Cuban boxing where some of these guys are a little bit more offensively oriented. And it was wild seeing somebody with those trunks pressing a fight that much. And doing it in a manner where he's just not really taking too many shots back. I thought he was fantastic.
I saw my guy Mike Velos in the corner too. Love seeing a Mike Velos thing. My only criticism, to me, Hernandez reminds me a lot of Adames when Carlos Adames was coming up. Powerful, strong boxing ability, but kind of what brings him to the dance is size and overpowering guys. And I saw him just overpower an Angel Ruiz. Also, how good is Angel Ruiz for like the role he serves in boxing as a veteran?
And I also think it's one thing to overpower somebody, but when they go to swing back and they can't catch you, I think that's what really becomes disheartening. And I think that's going to be some of his X factor, is bringing that inside fighting mixed with the natural defensive ability and reflexes.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot to like there, but we're starting to get into this era of how can we just move guys too fast? And it's like this guy Hernandez, if he gets 18, 20 fights under him, he could be really good. I just don't want him to prematurely get put into fights when he's developing. You know, there were things I saw that I'd like to see cleaned up. He got square on the ropes because he felt like the guy's shots weren't going to hurt him. So he's just loading up on big shots. These are things that I'd like to see, like fight another level of competition, have a little bit of a hard fight, but develop. And I think we're getting into this thing with guys with deep amateur pedigree want to get into real money fights rather quickly, and they're skipping a step. So we're microwaving fighters. And when we microwave a fighter, we don't get that Sugar Ray Leonard all the time. You know, we get fighters that have some flaws that just you need experience to get them. And that's kind of what I'm hoping, that if they move a little slower with Hernandez, because I don't see him as a Lomachenko type talent. And that's no knock.
Nah, he's more like a Ugas.
That's a perfect compare. And what happened with Ugas? It was a slower build. He lost a few fights and he had to rebuild.
Yeah, but stylistically, I think there's a lot there, and I also think that he probably hits a little harder. So maybe a more destructive Ugas.
Okay. In the chat, they're talking about our guy Jesus Ramos Jr. Let's jump over to that. Ramos Jr. stops Jeison Rosario. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was a great performance from Jesus, and I know that in the commentary they seem to want him to step on the gas a little more, but I just thought he did a beautiful job of effectively breaking Rosario down round after round. Shout out to Rosario for taking as many as he did. I was truly surprised at his durability and will in this fight. You know, we've seen him dropped with body shots. We've seen him stopped multiple times, and he just showed up like, I'm really trying to win this fight, and he was completely outclassed. I think it was bordering on like a mismatch, but Rosario showed up to fight and he was game, and you got to give him respect for that. But, you know, for me, a 10 out of 10 from Jesus.
Shout out to the chat jumping. First time to the show. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, share it, tell a friend, leave some comments. We want the comment section to be lively as always, and we hope you enjoy the program. Subscribe. Dakota's got a show too. Jesus Ramos, to me, what I saw, commentary was all over the place for this fight. I felt like there was not a lot of in-ring action being called. There was a lot of we see one thing and we're just going to stick with that thing. And in this fight, it was Rosario was taking too much punishment, which he was. But I felt like the story of the fight was Rosario was really in shape. He was putting a lot of pressure on Ramos, who I think he's a solid middleweight, but he hasn't gotten his feet wet if he wants to be a middleweight. This was Rosario's a veteran who I think is more filled out to a middleweight body as of now. So Rosario was weaponizing pace, putting physicality on him. He was kind of coming in tricky. Ramos was catching him because he's talented counterpuncher and can do a lot of things, but there was some things Rosario was doing. And the story of the fight was he's just taking too many shots. Why isn't Bob stopping it? And what I was seeing was Ramos is naturally the more talented, quicker, faster-handed guy. But Rosario got to a point in the fight where this was his last hurrah, and he was trying to make it to the final bell. And I think there was a disservice in the storytelling because I get fighter safety is there, but this is a former world champion who's proud, who's fighting on a pay-per-view against probably a future world champion. And it kind of brings in some questionable ethics on Rosario and his team when you don't kind of put in a little bit of that. Dakota, am I just getting too emotional because I know Bob and them, or is there some rationale there?
I thought that they could have ended that fight at multiple different points. As much as, again, I give credit to Rosario for his durability on this one. He really didn't land much of anything the whole fight that gave me any kind of impression that there was any hope. And so I think that the fight far outlasted what it should have. I think if he was going to fight again after this, the longer it went, the less hope I had for that possibility. So I don't know. I don't think it was a great call to kind of just let this guy who's been stopped as many times as he has just take shots in a fight that he seemed otherwise to have like no hope in.
Also, shout out to Las Vegas. Seems like they're quick to stop fights now, which I'm not opposed to. It felt like the referees are like not going to give you the benefit of the doubt on this evening, which is probably for the better of the sport. Jesus Ramos, to me, I've always said it since I've known you. We gave him Prospect of the Year when I was at ITR in 2021, I believe. He's a dude. He's like one of the best fighters in the division. I'm not sure why he's not higher profile on some of these cards. I know you feel the same way I do, but when you watch him, just basically he does everything right. He just needs these big, meaningful fights and championship experience. What are your thoughts leaving this fight from Ramos?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's potentially the best guy in the division. That's just speculative, right? We got to see it play out. I thought he won the Lubin fight. It's not. It wasn't the worst decision I've ever seen either, but I don't think it was like a good decision. I really do think that Jesus Ramos, at least on a stylistic level, has the variety and the adaptability to hang with anybody at 154 right now, and honestly at 160.
So let's talk about Stephen Fulton. Absolutely loved seeing his performance, and I thought that we were going to get the cringy. I told you guys hate me. Really sincere. Like I love seeing a fighter that's in tears for winning a world title when most fighters now are talking about the amount of money they should be making. The level of sincerity that Fulton had for this fight made me more of a fan of him because it was like you could tell he could have rubbed it in people's faces and maybe he will, but his initial thought was like, I did this. I overcame something. He had the best fight of his career ever, outboxing Figueroa, who gave him a hard fight, who in the first fight I thought he lost, avenged some demons in my head because that was a hard fight, and he had come off the Inoue loss. Outfit was wild. I think there's a generational thing for me when you're wearing an outfit that looks like jeans. I'm not sure if he was wearing Timberlands or they were boxing shoes. But you know what? That is a huge risk to stand out like that and take a fight, because if you lose a fight looking like that, that's really bad. So I was proud to see Stephen Fulton just have a great night of boxing. And I think more so the dignified way he took the fight. And he kind of won me over fight week, Dakota, when he said becoming a 2-division champion is closer to being in the Hall of Fame. That hits me right in the heart. When guys start talking Hall of Fame, accolades, achievement, that's the stuff I like
No,
hearing.
he's a real fighter, bro. Like, there's no doubt about it. He's a real fighter. I mean, I don't think he would have taken since the Inoue fight. I don't think just that he's taken Carlos Castro and Brandon Figueroa, I think shows you like this is a real guy. He's not out here, pussyfooting around trying to build his record back up and build his brand back up or whatever. He wants to take real fighters and prove his mettle. And I was surprised, frankly, at how he just completely outclassed Figueroa in this one. And I think some of that is Figueroa, and we'll get to that. But Fulton, in the same ways that he would sit in the pocket in that first fight, he didn't do that in this fight. He would grab Brandon, he would turn him, he would smother him. There was just a lot of different things that he was doing to prevent Figueroa from getting into his punching range. And he just never really let him get on balance to throw those kind of shots. So a tremendous performance. That's what great fighters do, right? Like you take a bad loss and you come back like that. That's how you really become like a great. And I think he's moving in that direction.
Well, we talk about that. That's like one of our Hall of Fame things is a Hall of Fame fighter loses a fight and then has a remarkable comeback where you completely forget about that loss. You go, oh yeah, and Fulton's now accomplished that. I did see what you're seeing. I think Figueroa has lost something on his fastball, but I also don't want to discredit just how friggin' good.
This is not discrediting Fulton, and I'll say it if you don't want to. Brandon had no zip on any of his shots. There was times where you could see him throwing, and it was almost like his body just couldn't react. He had no timing. He had no sense of his own range. It was really like a pretty tough performance to watch if you're a fan of his. And it's, I think a lot of it, bro, I think it's the thing that I've been saying about a lot of these American fighters, bro. He doesn't fight. He doesn't fight. So then you get in the ring with a really sharp guy who moves well, who's a great counter puncher, who's fast as shit, and you don't know what to do with him anymore. Maybe you did 3 years ago, but you don't know anymore. And it's hard for me to not think like a guy that size who never fights, bad weight cut. There's a million different things that could have happened with this, but he just had no zip and no snap. And therefore he really had no chance at winning.
Yeah, I think this is a classic double whammy, right? You never want the double whammy, but he's got a style that only a fight fan could love, where he takes excessive damage. So even in quote unquote easy fights, he's going to get hit and the damage meter is going to fill up. Remember, boxing is human beings. It's not Street Fighter 2, the video game. So, they don't come in with a full health bar. If you take damage, your health bar is still at that point because you're a human being. You're not a video game character. I think a lot of boxing fans forget that. The weight cut probably played a factor, and I have to wonder, did he overtrain? Because a little bit of this also looked like when guys give their all in the gym and he got to fight night and he had nothing left. Maybe it's the dreaded triple whammy, but it was about as shocking of a performance from Figueroa, seeing how he was fighting, as the Luka Doncic trade.
Dude, but you got to think about it too, bro. If you haven't fought in damn near a year, how what are your chances of catching a guy that sharp? But the thing that was frustrating, I think, if you're looking for something from him, even when he would get himself in punching position, he just didn't look like he even had the ability to let his shots go. It was truly surprising.
What sucks for Fulton, because he had such a good performance, is real guys, right? Real fight guys are probably going to be on the fence about how much to praise him, which is unfair. But they're going to look at Figueroa and be like, I want to see how Figueroa looks for his next fight, and I want to look in Fulton how he does in his next fight. Because there was something a little off with Figueroa, though I think any version of Figueroa would have struggled with this version of Fulton.
Sure, like who's to say if Fulton hadn't just stood in front of Figueroa the entire fight and just squared up, that Brandon wouldn't have found a rhythm. But I don't know, man. I just think that, Brandon's got to really figure out what he wants to do moving forward, because again, the fighting once a year, once every 15 months, it's not working. Maybe the weight class he's in is not working for how little he fights, but you know, it looks like he's getting left behind a little bit, bro.
Yeah, and I think the exciting thing is Fulton's a fighting man. He loves fighting. By the way, shout out to everybody in the chat. Throw us some comments, man. Let me know how you like my hairline. Fulton's a fighting man, and I think he wants to be active. And the WBC featherweight title needs to be active, man. Ray Vargas, is he a champion? Isn't he a champion? I'm not sure. And I write about boxing.
No, he is.
But there's 2 WBC champions because this was for the belt too.
Oh, well,
So
is
then
one of them interim or is one of them?
Well, there has to be an I forget I think maybe Ray Vargas is now in recess because he's been inactive. I'm doing the worst thing you can possibly do with a public platform where I don't fully know a story and I'm just acting like it's facts. So I'm like,
I just want to put it out there that, you know, getting the draw with Nick Ball would have meant that he retained his title, and as far as I understand, that hasn't formally changed, but I could be wrong about that. We have a great chat. Maybe somebody has the answer. Don't mute yourself though, bub.
Let me do what I shouldn't do and do research. This is so unboxing. I'm doing research. So
while you do that research, though, I'll interject and add that I think adding Stephen Fulton to an already pretty exciting featherweight division is an awesome and welcome addition. I think about fights with him and Nick Ball. I think about fights with him and Angelo Leo, Espinoza, maybe Robesi at some point. There's just so many great fights to see Fulton in at 126 after a performance like that. Whereas at 122, if you can't beat Inoue and you didn't have a competitive enough performance to get a rematch with Inoue, what is there really for him at 122? He's a really fun and exciting, skillful addition to this weight class.
Okay, so Rogue, I love Rogue Fitness Equipment, but this is Rogue, did the research I did while I disappeared. So Vargas is injured, so he's champion in recess. When he's back, he'll be the mandatory for the title.
Gotcha.
So Stephen
That's why we love
is
it.
an outright fighter. The only monster Canelo is fighting is Neo Inoue. I mean, that's a different conversation probably for a different day, but I think you and me agree. Canelo is more of an exhibition fighter at this point, not to be disrespectful, but Canelo is at a point in his career where I think he's looking at guys that draw good money and aren't.
He's more than an exhibition fighter. I'm not willing to give him that. He's not fighting Conor McGregor. He's fighting the number 7 guy in his weight class.
But
what's he doing that Floyd didn't do? He's doing the same shit Floyd did.
He's doing the same thing that Floyd did, but to keep it a buck, I was on Floyd about it, where there's interesting, compelling guys, but I think because Canelo, I don't know, he's indifferent to the media, or he's a rich guy and he's not as Floyd always had a way of making the fans and the media want to be around him. I feel like Canelo is very fine with privacy, so he gets more backlash because he's not like, hey, come with me, watch me just work out for a long period. Like, does Canelo even do media workouts? I don't even think he does a media workout anymore. That was a big part of the Floyd thing, was let's get 400 people and the fire marshal down here because there's so many media that want to see me work out. And Canelo's the opposite. But I don't know. I think for me, Canelo's at a stage where he's looking at fighters that bring a lot of reward and the risk isn't too high. And guys like Benavidez, guys like Iglesias, guys like, I mean, even Diego Pacheco I think Diego could fight Canelo.
I think there's guys of a certain size that represent a type of threat that he's not willing to get in with. I do think if he fights Terrence Crawford, I can't call him an exhibition fighter. So there is a thing where you're right. It's very Mayweather-ian, but I don't know that I'm willing to say that he's taking fights completely void of risk. You know, when his last fights are Edgar Berlanga and Jaime Munguia. Those aren't really the fights that I wanted to see, but I can't say they're risk-free either.
No, and that maybe I'm just being too critical because there's been some really compelling generational fights that he could have put on, like against Benavidez and others, you know, but really it's the Benavidez fight we've wanted to see. And the fact that that fight hasn't happened has just been really, really atrocious.
I couldn't agree more.
So let's go to the best fight on the card, in my opinion. Isaac Cruz, Angel Fierro, to do the dickhead jerk off boxing guy thing. We called it. We saw this fight being a good fight. You know, you got two Mexican fighters. You got Fierro, who had pulled off an upset in the past, criminally underrated, was pushing Pitbull all week, looked like he was ready to fight. You know, they kept headbutting at the weigh-ins. I think 140 is kind of the limit for Pitbull. He's probably going to have trouble with any elite 140 guy. That's probably some of the equation of this fight. But man, was this a good fight. I think this stole the show. You're muted.
I again, like Benavidez, seeing Pitbull get buzzed like that, I can't recall ever seeing him get buzzed, and Fierro was able to do it successfully. You know, like you said, Lukie, the elite guys at 140, some of the elite guys at 140, like a Richardson Hitchens, even like a Liam Paro, there's just going to be a level of boxer that he gets to that he's not going to be able to hang with that style. But again, if you give him those pockets to punch, bro, he really is dangerous. He may not be the hardest hitter at 140, but I don't think he's a feather fist, and he maintains a pace and a physicality that most guys are just not going to be able to handle. So even somebody like Teofimo, who will stand in front of you for prolonged periods and be inactive, I think that Cruz has a chance in that fight. If you give him those pockets to punch, those windows of opportunity, he's a problem. And there's only going to be a handful of guys that can deal with that.
So this fight reminded me of a fight that it shouldn't have, right? You're going to laugh when I say it, but it reminded me of Marquez versus Baby Bull Diaz. And it's funny to compare Pitbull to Baby Bull Diaz because they're nothing alike, but it was so unexpected and wild at times. It reminded me of watching Baby Bull fight Marquez and the unexpected nature of that. And it felt as though, in my opinion, they should be rewarded with a rematch, a 12-round fight for whatever, because it was just such a compelling matchup. This is a fight that should main event a card because there's bad blood, mutual respect. This felt like a fight. Like, it feels like the best use of Pitbull from a fan perspective is finding rivals and getting him in interesting matchups with rivals and seeing if he can create an organic rivalry. And this almost felt like the birth of two interesting Mexican boxing figures.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Fierro was entirely there to be hit. I mean, he had almost a defense-free performance in this one. And early in the fight, I was like, I don't know how this guy's not getting knocked out because he's just taking everything clean right on the chops. But he had the durability, he had the heart, he had the warrior mentality, all those things. But like, do I think that Pitbull Cruz can beat Jack Catterall? No, I don't think he has a chance in that fight. Do I think he can beat Hitchens? No, I don't think he has a chance in that fight. So I think he may get to certain points in his career where he's earned that opportunity to get those fights. But I think you're right. I think the best use of his time is finding interesting matchups and interesting rivalries. I mean, honestly, bro, I think that him and Teofimo would be a really great matchup because I just think like his relentlessness is something that would not suit Teo, but Teo obviously has a substantially more natural ability and size. So I think that, you know, maybe that's like the dream fight for Pitbull.
I think that with Pitbull, any fighter who has lapses and lacks mental concentration for each and every round is an interesting fight because he's a guy that his will is never broken. Like, he just keeps going forward. He keeps going forward. I did see him tire kind of earlier than I expected and earlier than previous fights, which I'm not sure if that's something we need to be aware of. Calvin in the chat said Pitbull's style sells itself. I know so many guys that like watching him. And then Gallo Negro, how to F is David a pound for pound fighter? Well, easy, Gallo. He's got really credible wins and accomplishments. So you win credible and distinguished opponents, you're a pound for pound fighter. So I'm glad I could answer that question for you. That was a pretty simple one to answer. You beat 3 really, really good guys, 4 really, really good guys. You're on the pound for pound list. Yeah, I mean, do you think this fight should be rematched, or do you think they should just go on and Fierro should like test a guy coming off a loss, but it's a
I think
credible.
I totally get why Fierro wants the fight. I don't need to see it again, but I'd love to see it again, right? I think every time these guys fight, it's going to look like this. It's going to be a fight of the year type of candidate. But again, like a Gotti Ward, it's not going to be one where I'm looking at who's the best guy in the division. It's just kind of one for the fans, one for the homies. But I think that Pitbull Cruz, while he has his limitations, there are things about him that are going to make him very difficult for the vast majority of guys, um, even at the very top. And one thing that I think is interesting is, if Hitchens were to have a performance like he did against Lemos, Pitbull Cruz would give him a handful on that night, if that was the style of fight that it became. So I think he's an interesting guy in the mix. The one thing that I don't love is how it just feels like Rayo's kind of getting overlooked. And now we're talking about Pitbull fighting Ryan Garcia. We're talking about Pitbull fighting Devin Haney and all these other people. But that's really the guy that deserves the fight and has shown a skill level where it's like, I feel like he is a 50-50 against anybody. So I don't love that part. And I know that the stylistic perks of an Isaac Cruz fight and them always being action fights. I know that's part of why people like him so much, giving Tank a hard fight. But Rayo is ultimately the one we should be talking about in these situations, it feels like.
Well, next month, Rayo has a chance to kind of make his name in that conversation because he's fighting next month. And I think part of it
Who's he
is
fighting?
Gary Antoine Russell on the pay-per-view. Okay. So, I mean, he's taking a fight. And if he were to be successful in that fight, I think that gets him out there. Undercard, there was an absolute banger between Marco Suello and Christian Olivo. Did you catch this?
I did. But I watched the entire undercard, and now you're saying those names, and I can't put my finger on who that is.
Well, it was a fight where Christian Olivo was basically outboxing and outpointing Suello the whole fight. It was a WBA featherweight eliminator for Nick Ball's belt.
Oh,
and
good. The Argentinian guy, right? The Argentinian guy.
Yeah, he knocked him out with 2 shots. Didn't love the stoppage. Would have liked to have seen him to see if he could have made the bell because he was up. But a banger of a fight. If you're a hardcore fight fan, go back and watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, Olivo just looked like he had that veteran boxer puncher style. He actually threw his shots a lot like Juan Manuel Marquez, just in terms of the actual delivery of them. And Cuello just seemed like he was just having a hard time figuring out the tricky vet. And something happened in like the 7th or 8th round, and Olivo just started to look uncomfortable. Like he just visibly looked uncomfortable. And shout out to Cuello. Those are the kinds of wins where it's like you are officially now dangerous until the final bell, and people always see you that way.
Yeah. Let's skip over to Clarissa Shields, 3-division undisputed champion. I feel like I should throw her in my pound for pound list just to make people really mad. Truly amazing. If you saw the size difference with Perkins, yes, she's 42. Yes, she only had 5 fights, but she was dramatically bigger than Clarissa Shields, and Shields won pretty much every round. Even though Perkins started to put her size on Shields later in the fight. Did you have any thoughts on kind of a storybook ending for Shields? She comes home, makes history again, and has a movie in the theaters at the same time.
All of that is incredible, right? Like what she's doing in many ways is is extremely special. I think the issue for me when I'm watching that fight is just no disrespect to Perkins, man, but the talent gap is so massive that while there are titles and accolades and achievements attached to that, it's tough for me to say undisputed with the same level of enthusiasm for her that I do for Usyk when that's the opponent. And again, it's not that Perkins is without skill, but it's just there was a massive gap in talent here. And what I think Clarissa is incredible, but these types of fights, it's a little tough for me to get excited about them, to be honest.
I think that the one pushback I'll give you with Clarissa is she gets a lot of criticism, kind of like how there's lack of depth. There's basically like one really distinguished fighter in each division. In heavyweight, you could argue maybe Franchon Cruz if she moved up or something. But really, like, it was Christina Hammer, it was Savannah Marshall. There was one fighter to become undisputed. Every other fighter, it was. But I think the pushback I would say is, well, how come no one else did it before her? Right? So
Well,
like
because
that,
they're not as good as her.
and that's the
That's
one
the
thing
answer.
I think that argument, sometimes people go, the competition's bad. But I always point back to, I get it, the competition isn't great, but Shields is still accomplishing something with the same kind of field of people that no other woman could ever do. And I think that that kind of like how Fulton's performance could get overlooked by how bad Figueroa looked. I think that also the fact that Shields is accomplishing this needs to be noted as well.
It absolutely needs to be noted. I'm not taking away anything of what she's doing, but I feel like there's an expectation from her when I hear interviews of her that when she makes this accomplishment that now as a fan should address it with the same level of seriousness that I do for Usyk or for Bernard Hopkins. And I just can't do that when the competition is as scarce as it is. It doesn't mean that what she's doing is not incredibly special, because it is. Um, but it's not her fault that there is a lack of interesting opponents for her. But at this point, anytime she fights, man, I'm just kind of assuming that she's going to dominate. And if I was also holding her to the same standard that I would hold any other fighter, it's just like, how are you not stopping this girl? I mean, you got her hurt multiple times. You put her on her ass. How is this a fight that goes the distance? And any other star, I think, would get criticized for that. You know what I mean?
Dakota, we need you to answer this question. Cali Rich 951 said, "You need Riz, bro. Feels like I'm watching golf right now." What's your thoughts on that, Dakota?
Hey, listen, bro. I haven't watched golf in a decade, so I can't relate.
Okay, there you go. That's I guess that's Dakota's Riz for you. He
What do
just
what does he want? Does he want that AM radio fucking doing, or does he want us to do some
Hey, you
TikTok
know what? Maybe
dances?
I'll
Like,
give it.
what you looking for, my boy?
Yeah, give it to us. Here, let me hit you with it.
You're gonna go full cornball. Maybe that's what he wants, bro.
Yeah, maybe.
That's Riz if I've ever seen it. Hell yeah, dude. Now say something insulting about someone.
Let's just make a absurd point that's not based in fact, right?
Hit the
So yeah. What did you think of Skylar Lacey versus Brandon Moore?
You're gonna have to fill in the gaps on that undercard for me, bub. I didn't see it.
Okay, well, I will fill it in. This is probably the only notable fight to bring up. It was a clinch fest. Both guys are spoilers. They're interesting opponents when you put them in with tough guys, but together they just are going to make an awful fight. Lacey came into boxing late as a D1 football player who actually, in the telecast, they said blocked for Lamar Jackson, fun fact. And Brandon Moore was a basketball player who converted to boxing. You can pretty clearly tell both of them are not guys that grew up boxing, because they make boxing look
It's
very
not
hard.
natural.
Yeah, they make, how like there's skateboarders or there's boxers or there's basketball players. Some guys make it look easy and some guys make it look really, really hard like it is. These guys kind of make everything look hard. Like you see that how difficult a heavyweight fight was. I believe Lacey lost 3 points for holding. Moore lost 1 point for holding. The fight ended in a Royal Rumble-like fashion where a tackle occurred and Lacey tackled Moore out of the ring and through a table. Moore got up and beat referee Steve Willis's 18 or 20 count at 18, rolled under, and won by disqualification. It was just a sloppy heavyweight fight. It was Moore's first fight with Salida Promotions. I'm sure he wished his first fight was more consequential than this, but it was just a strange fight.
That sounds very strange. Just real quick, I'm wondering your opinion on this. When we watch a star fighter, any star fighter, right, that is in a fight that we expect them to win, they're outclassing that fighter, they have them buzzed, and then they don't get the stoppage. Isn't that somewhat worthy of criticism?
I think so.
And isn't that what she gave us?
Who?
Claressa.
That she should have gotten the stoppage?
100%. I mean, she's dominating the fight. She's got the girl hurt multiple times. And again, part of me criticizing her is saying, I am taking you seriously. I'm going to start holding you to the same standard that I would hold Usyk to, or that I would hold Terrence Crawford to. And what the standard that I would hold Crawford to is if he buzzed somebody in the third round and then let them coast the rest of the fight, I'd call him on it.
I mean, I get where you're coming from. I think the thing for me is the size difference was a lot. So the difference in bodies was a lot. So she had her hurt, but I think that Perkins was big enough and mentally strong enough that she didn't want to get knocked out on that night. So it was going to take a lot. And I also, having watched basically all of Clarissa's fights,
yeah, me too.
She's aggressive, but she's not someone that's going to sell out. And you see that with her knockout ratio. She hits hard, but part of the reason she doesn't have a lot of knockouts, I think, is because she's very tactical. She's not someone that puts foot on the gas and leaves herself open to be counterpunched.
But there's a lacking in the follow-up there that I feel like if they were looking for what's a thing we can work on, that would be the thing for me that I think would also kind of shut a lot of the people up that do discredit her.
For sure. And I think that that's what she's so great. She needs to start looking at very small things because that's the level she's at.
Yeah.
Dakota, do you want to talk about Adam Azim stopping Sergey Lipinets?
I'm a little surprised at that result. That one I didn't get to see, but Lipinets has, outside of the Ennis fight, has been a pretty durable guy. And I think that Azim stopping Lipinets does say something about his caliber. But I didn't see the fight itself, so I couldn't break it down tactically.
I mean, Azim looked like $1 million.
He got that chin up in the air still?
What is it?
He got that chin up in the air still?
Of course. He's a guy that, he's got some really fun attributes and he's got some really flawed attributes.
He's just like Amir.
He has a lot of the same package. He doesn't have the same power. He doesn't have the same speed. Like Amir, Amir had some really big flaws, but what he brought to the ring was very formidable because he had some of the fastest hands we've ever seen in boxing, and the speed of his hands led to very, very heavy shots. There's something there with Azim, but do I feel comfortable with how far he can go? No, but I thought Lipinets was going to take him life and death, and he basically made this a one-sided fight. The one thing I'll bring up is he threw a lot of low blows. So with Azim, that's going to be something we got to watch. Is he a low blow bub? Is he a guy that's prone to throwing south of the equator, as our guy Morrow likes to say, when it's a big consequential fight?
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. I think that's a big check mark. Can you dominate a guy like that, who also had a really fun fight last year with, I think it was Robbie Davies on ProBox. That was a great fight to watch. And it kind of made me feel like, okay, Lipinets is like an older, durable guy. And seeing Azim, seeing how he keeps that chin up in the air, not really sure what that chin is like, I would have thought that would have been a competitive fight. So shout out to him.
I mean, I think that this is the check mark of a great fighter, right? We look for that 50-50. Will they win this fight? Can they beat the veteran? And he just passed it with flying colors and gets the walk-off knockout, which is really what you want at this stage. And they got to make the Dalton Smith Adam Azim fight at some point. I don't think that's a fight worthy of marinating.
I just think Dalton's ahead enough now where it's like, I want to see him in with the best of the division, whereas that's like the best young Brit of the division. And I think that Adam seems like he's moving in a direction where he'll also be in that class. And that's when I kind of want to see them. But I'm at a point, I want to see Dalton Smith against the winner, Catterall and Barbosa. I want to see him against Liam Paro. You know what I mean? I want to see him in some real matchups now.
I will say it might be important for you to go back and watch this one, because I think this performance put Azim, in my opinion, in that same category. He jumped into that level because I truly thought this was going to be a rock'em sock'em fight of the year type fight, and he outclassed him. I'm going to use the bathroom and load up on a cup of coffee. But while I do that, Dakota, why don't you give us your intel on Friday's Matchroom boxing card that you watched?
That was a fun little Brit card. I had a day off, which is rare in our lives, and I just happened to turn on DAZN to see about the fights this weekend, and there it was, a fun little Friday card. While I'm sitting here, I'm going to pull up the box rec on that, because there was a lot of new names for me. I really like the Eddie Hearn is doing prospect cards like that. I think one of the things that we're having a hard time with as a sport for a little bit was like every card is the same level. And so if you're not at that level already, you don't get to be on those cards. How do you develop all of those different things? And I love that local energy too. You know, that's some of what sometimes you're missing when you get the Saudi fights is you're missing some of that local energy, or that local support. Looking at some of the names here, I mean, I remember the first fight that I turned on was Jesse Brandon, a 140 pounder at the moment. Pretty smart guy. I think a little too willing at times to just kind of sit in front and take shots on the gloves. I feel like one of the commentators pointed that out as well. The fight of the night for me, and I'm sure Lukie will want to go through the rest of the card, but the draw between Junaid Bostan and Bilal Fawaz, hell of a fight. It felt like Fawaz, was landing the cleaner shots for the most part. But if I'm going round by round, it was actually a little tough for me to disagree with the decision because there was just certain rounds where Fawaz wasn't particularly active. Bostan is a lot younger, so there's more upside to him. He's a 22-year-old kid. Whereas Fawaz, I believe he's in his 30s. Let me check. Yeah, he's 36 years old. So, at different points in life, but at similar points in their careers, similar number of fights. And it was kind of youth versus experience, but maybe there wasn't that big of an experience gap. Jimmy Sains, I think, is an interesting guy to bring up. There's definitely some flaws there defensively, but there's a lot of things to like, man. I like the way he puts pressure on. I like his combination punching. I like the variety of shit that he throws. There's a lot to like with him, even though I think those gaps and those lapses where he gets hit, at a higher level, he's going to struggle.
Was that my guy, Jimmy Sands?
Yeah.
Sound like we're
I was
talking
just
about
kind of
Jimmy
running through
Sands.
some of my highlights of the night. One of them was Jimmy's performance. I thought that was really fun. And then I also kind of quickly ran through the Bostan versus
maybe
Fawaz
don't
fight.
call Jimmy Sands the next Golovkin. That felt like a premature nickname.
I didn't call him the next Golovkin.
No. I think that was on social media. They said like it's like whatever town he's from's Golovkin, and it's like, I think Golovkin had a little bit more to set things up, but he's a fun time. Junaid Bostan, I don't see it. He's got to get to the next level.
He's just really young too.
Yeah, it just feels like he's a kid from the social media era who has to kind of figure out who he's going to be in life, and he's kind of he lost this fight he got a draw with the guy, but it was a close fight, and felt like Bilal Fawaz, was that his name? Was able to kind of outwork him and kind of big brother him. It wasn't a talent component as much as he just kind of knew who he was and pushed him around and made the fight hard for him. And George Liddard, I think, is a very talented fighter, but it was not the greatest performance from him because Denzel Bentley had just knocked out this opponent in 2 rounds, and he just had a very close fight with him. He won 96-90. It was close, and I think this is his first kind of step-up fight. Maybe he had jitters, but I was really kind of expecting a little bit more from Liddard, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Osaze was clearly there to fight. And I think there was like a professional experience gap there for sure. I didn't have any expectations of Liddard because I hadn't seen him before. So for me, I was like, yeah, this guy's all right.
Okay, let's preview the fights. There's not a
Yo,
ton.
just real quick, I want to shout out this kid, Taylor Bevan. I was very impressed with him.
You know what's funny is I had him in my notes too. I really liked him. He had probably the most notable performance. The opposition wasn't the strongest. but like he looked like he could be a dude.
I think that there's a lot to like there.
So this week, I know that you like the chronological, not the meaningful order. So we'll go in chronological order. So tomorrow on Country Box's YouTube page, we have Oliver McCall in a 6-round fight and Maidel Sando against veteran Vaughn Alexander. So if you want to watch some boxing on Tuesday night, Country Box has your fix. What do you think about Oliver McCall, a former champion, fighting some really...
I don't have any thoughts on that, Lukie. That shit is goofy to me.
Well, I think that a Cuban boxer fighting Vaughn Alexander on the co-feature, if you're a hardcore fight fan, that's engaging.
I know, but Oliver McCall's like 70 years old, bro. Like, what are we doing?
Okay. Eye of the Tiger Management has a card, and that's going to be with Artur Baisanalov taking on Mohamed Mouini, which is a really good fight. Your guy, Bektir Jalioff, will be on the undercard, and Albert Ramirez, number 2 rated in the WBA, and I think the WBC, will be taking on a fight. Pretty solid Thursday night fight card for ESPN Plus.
That is a solid Thursday night card. I'm also kind of enjoying the variety of days in which fight cards used to fall. There was more of that when I was growing up, when there was like random Wednesday cards on Versus, or there was just a broader variety of days and times that you catch fights. And I feel like the more international we go in terms of the streaming and whatever, the more that we get.
Well, Eye of the Tiger, I'm not sure if you've watched a lot of these shows, but
the Canadian promoter, right?
But I mean, they put on a pretty solid product, in my opinion. And it's like a fun, hardcore fight enthusiast. The main and co-main are typically pretty good. The rest of the card are kind of developmental fights, but I think they run a very good show. It kind of feels like, I keep saying Street Fighter, dating myself, but it really feels like a Street Fighter set, because they serve like food and they have people watching who are eating at like what seems like a restaurant. And it feels like a stage from like one of those sets where there'd just be people in the background. But I think it's a great atmosphere. And we've seen they've developed a lot of really good fighters, like Christian Mbili came through that program, and now he's world class. And we're seeing Iglesias looking to make that jump. And Albert Ramirez is a guy. And now Jalioff is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist at super heavyweight, which is heavyweight, but really has moved slow as a professional. I think he turned pro in 2017, and he's still not a household name in 2025, which is 8 years. It's pretty slow for a pro, especially at heavyweight. So hopefully they can get some traction going. The big fight of the week, are you ready for it? Derek Chisora versus Otto Wallin.
I thought Chisora was done after the Joyce fight. Has he made the decision to kind of keep on keeping on for a bit here?
Apparently, because he's scheduled the fight this weekend against Otto Wallin.
Well, Derek Chisora, I felt like he should retire probably since that Fury fight. Like, I was like, dude, I think this might be it. But then he's like, he beats Kubrat Pulev, he beats Joe Joyce. He just like keeps finding reasons to stay relevant. And it's pretty miraculous at his age, with the number of hard fights that he's had, that anybody cares anymore. But he finds ways to keep you caring. You know what I mean? Like, if he was what I thought he was, there wasn't any way he would have won those fights. But he's a find the way kind of professional. I don't know how long he can keep that up, or if he is still at a point where he can beat a guy like Wallin. I haven't seen Wallin since the Joshua fight, though. Who knows? Maybe Chisora just walks in and knocks him out. That's kind of the beauty of him.
So I think the beauty of Chisora is he's kind of like the everyman. So he's going to say some wild stuff at a press conference that people are going to, and over the last 10 years, social media, like, you go out to eat with somebody. How often do you see people not on a phone when you're eating? It's just common that people want to be connected to the internet. Someone travels internationally. Oh my God, I don't have my data plan. I can't go and check my email. I have to connect to Wi-Fi. Like, these things, it's just become so intertwined with our lives. And Chisora says those crazy things at times, or those sound clips that get shared on those platforms. So I think that because of that, he's gotten a second life. And I think his Hagler appreciation and a lot of fight fans who
But it's
don't
more
know.
than just his yap, Lukey, because if he didn't come out and win one of these things every once in a while, I don't think anyone would give a shit. But he does. It's not like Broner where he just yaps and then gets beat up on.
No, there's a talent component. And the talent component is he's really, really tough. He's really, really physical, and he walks it how he talks it. He's a fighting man, you know? And I think that that's exemplified by Fury gave him a third fight. I think that there's a mutual respect there, that they're just two natural fighters, you know? And, you know, he had that first fight with Joseph Parker that I think you could have said he won. And then he's backed it up with a big win over Joe Joyce. This is a real fight. In my opinion, Wallin should win it. But, you know, is Chisora gonna, like, to me, it feels like Chisora's doing one more fight here and maybe a Saudi fight, and then he's gonna be done.
I honestly think Chisora is going to be a little too rugged for Wallin. I think it's going to be a little too rough and tumble and not thoughtful enough for Wallin's style.
So you think Wallin's kind of hitting a physical ceiling where, like, when he fights these guys, do you think some of that's shop worn, or do you think it's stylistically?
I think some of it's style. Like I remember when he fought Brazil, you know, Brazil just couldn't get to him. But Chisora is a guy, he's just like a big lumbering guy who closes distance. And I don't see any reason why he couldn't just get in Wallin's chest and shove him around and land something that puts him out.
What's your level of interest for the fight?
Mild to moderate. And as much of a miracle, and as not a miracle, but as special as I think Chisora is, I just think he's overstaying his welcome, and I just wonder when this turns sour, if it turns sour.
I think a lot of people share that sentiment. A great co-feature that our friend Lionel Watson shared in the comment section. What do you think about Willie Hutchinson versus Zach Parker? That's the co-feature. That's a banger.
Yeah, I feel bad. I don't have enough context. I don't know that I've seen Willie Hutchins, and I don't know.
You've seen Willie Hutchinson. He fought Joshua Buatsi on the London.
Yeah, I didn't see that fight. And I don't think I've seen Parker since the Ryder fight. So I know that's a good matchup, but I'm missing some of the context.
So Hutchinson is a guy, to me, that, you know, is kind of overachieving. He underachieved in his career, and now he's starting to overachieve. Buatsi kind of showed that there's a level that Hutchinson probably won't get to, in my opinion, but maybe I'm just being too critical. Zach Parker, to me, is the definition of a very strong fighter who ran into John Ryder, who, by the way, shout out to, like, dad bod John Ryder working the corner.
Dude, I mean, he is built like me now. That's hilarious.
I love it. But Ryder was a will guy, and he just kind of took the fight out of a young Zach Parker. I mean, my gut feeling is guys like that are punchers, when a John Ryder gets a hold of a guy like that, they just are forever changed. It's hard for me to believe that he's going to have that same confidence, that same belief that he's going to be a knockout guy. I believe when Ryder beat him, he was highly ranked and stuff, and we've never even seen him in a consequential fight that we've discussed.
A friend in the chat earlier, I think you might say he didn't have enough riz. You know what I mean?
He didn't have enough riz is a great one. So my gut feeling is Hutchinson is just going to kind of win this fight. But hopefully it's like a compelling, fascinating fight, because I'm going to be watching it, and it would be great if on my Saturday afternoon I get an even there's nothing I like more than a banger of a UK fight at 2:00 West Coast time. Like, that is a great treat. It's like, and especially when boxing's over by 3:00 West Coast time, like, I get to have a life. It's like, oh wow, I can go out this evening. I can go to dinner. I can have hobbies. I can go to a movie. Like, there's nothing more that I love.
Yeah, a nice afternoon UK card is always fun.
Yeah, so that's that. We're gonna get to the ProBox card. Rusty Cage. Did I just say a name that was embarrassing?
Not sure.
Not
Listen, what's really embarrassing is our lack of Riz. That's what we need to
Canelo
be
versus
focused on.
Crawford official? What a circus fight. It's not official. Like, for all I know, Canelo wants to fight in May and he's not fighting Crawford. So how can that fight be official?
There's nothing official. There's nothing
official. And if someone's fighting before an alleged date, for me, even if it is official, it's not official because you got to get through one fight before you get through the other fight. And when you double book fights, bad stuff always happens. So there's only one fight. I sound like a trainer or a camp, but there's only one fight at one time. You can't go, oh, well, he's going to fight this guy, and this guy. There's just one fight. Lionel Watson, ProBox TV has a great card this Saturday too. We're going to get into it right now, Lionel. That is the, let me just give you the timestamps for those following along. It is, okay. Ramon Cardones, ProBox staple lately. I love watching his fights, man. He's this heavy-handed fighter. I believe Joel Diaz, the Diaz brothers, are his trainers. He is taking on Brian Acosta, undefeated fighter. Very consequential junior featherweight bout. Like, I feel like the winner of this could be a sneaky in-a-way opponent.
Yeah, I'm looking them up right now. I think I've seen Cardenas before. Yeah, I saw him his last fight against Ramirez. That was a very impressive performance. Yeah, he's talented. I don't know about anybody fighting in a way. That's a little crazy, but muted, bub.
Ranked number 2 in the division, and there's not that many guys. And I'm not fully convinced Inoue is going up to featherweight, man, because it's like
I want to see Akhmadalia before we start getting into guys that are pro box main events. No respect to them, but I think that there's a little bit bigger fish to fry for Inoue at the moment.
Well, let's get it. Let's completely not talk about this amazing pro box card, which is probably the most evenly and competitive match of the weekend, and get to Dakota's real thoughts, which is, do you think Inoue is avoiding MJ?
I don't think he's avoiding anybody, bub.
Okay, we just had to get to that. We got thoughts on the Cuello stoppage on the Benavidez prelims. We did talk about this earlier. I didn't love it because Olivo was ahead on points. So I feel like the guy ahead should get the benefit of the doubt. Dakota, real quickly for our friend that just jumped in, what did you think?
Those kinds of fights are always fun because it's like proof that the fight's not over until the final bell. It felt like Olivo was up a couple of rounds, though I felt like maybe it was a little closer than the commentators were talking about it. For Cuello, like I said earlier, once you get a win like that, a late stoppage in a fight you're losing, now you develop a reputation of, this guy's dangerous until the final bell. And I thought that was really impressive. And, I also think that Olivo is a really skilled guy that can be in some good fights.
Definitely. Any thoughts on this matchup between Ramon Cardenas versus Brian Acosta? Acosta's 20-0. He's a solid, formidable fighter.
Kind of the experience gap here.
There's an experience gap, but he's kind of the guy that you don't really want to fight. Where it's like a lot of his fights are in Mexico, some of his fights were in Canada. Probably not a ton of footage. You could get Rafael Espinoza, or you could just get a guy. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of those fights where you really don't know what this guy is gonna be unless you have some intel in the gyms.
Yeah. I don't know enough about Acosta either. But clearly, at least for Cardenas, off of that last fight that I saw, I think he's likely, if not definitely, a world-class guy. And so, to me, just on what I'm looking at here, it looks like he's going to, have a level of an experience gap that's going to be tough to handle unless this kid is really special.
Yeah. Sad news. The Lester Martinez-Joshawn James fight is going to be postponed yet again. Martinez out with the flu. Thoughts?
Man, that boy got to find a new weight class if he's going to get sick every training camp. I mean, isn't that kind of like one of the telltale signs? Is if you get a cold every time you're trying to hit weight, maybe that's not your weight class. But mostly what I am is I'm heartbroken for Jeison, who had a really exciting, I think it was 2023 or was it 2024?
2023. Last year he only fought once.
Yeah, 2023 was such a big year for him, and now it's been kind of languishing largely because of this matchup here. So I hope they can make this fight happen or not, and he can just move on. Because he's a really exciting guy that I would hate to see just sit around.
Yeah. Just to round out this undercard, here's a fight that you should be able to comment on. Oh my God, this is such a hard name for me. Shakhtizan Rachmanov taking on Justin Paleto. You might remember Rachmanov from having a draw with Jojo Diaz in 2021. He beat Zelfa Barrett to become the IBF champion and lost a split decision to Joe Cordina in a very exciting fight that we nominated in 2023 as one of the better fights of the year. He hasn't fought for essentially 2 years. It's been a little under 2 years, 2 months before 2 years. He's coming back against Justin Paleto. Paleto has been a staple of the ProBox TV circuit. He lost a split decision to Miguel Meduno, but he had beaten Jerry Perez prior. What are you expecting from this fight? This could be a decent bout.
Well, Rachmanov is one of those contenders that I've actually wondered to myself recently, like, where is this guy? Because this is a pretty exciting and dynamic opponent. Is this at 130? Because I remember that
I think it's 35, but we have to wait. I think it's 35, but I can't confirm nor deny.
Yeah, I would think that there's a class and an experience gap here, because to me, Rachmanov is a guy that likely is legitimately like a top 10 guy at 130. We'll have to see how he looks at 135. That's one of those weird weight class jumps. But he's a super effective, smart, aggressive guy that I think has some more layers to him than somebody like a Pitbull Cruz in terms of, the different types of approaches that he can take. So I think he's an exciting contender. We'll see what he's got.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting fight. And then one other or two fighters I wanted to bring up on this undercard. Rihanna Rios, I think she's getting very close to a title fight. She fights in women's bantamweight. She was perennially one of the best women's fighters in USA boxing. She was actually on the track to be an Olympian and turned pro. She trains with Lamont Roach Sr., who you might know because he trains Lamont Roach Jr., who has a really big fight against Gervonta Davis that Dakota doesn't like happening. So if anyone from DC is from there, at Dakota, so they can get at him. She's someone to watch because she's, in my opinion, an elite level talent. And one of my favorite young fighters, bantamweight Michael Angeletti, he's taking on Judy Flores. When you're fighting a man with the name Judy, he's tough as hell. He's only lost to guys that are dudes. So he lost to Antonio Nueves in 2022. He lost to Andrew Maloney, and then he lost a split decision to a fighter that I haven't heard of in the Philippines. But it seems like the only guys that can beat him are pretty much contender level fighters in this division. Angeletti famously entered the Olympic trials in 2019 in Lake Charles, Louisiana. It's the #1 seed. He lost to Anthony Alagasca, who's now a world champion, in the first round, and then wasn't able to compete again. Really, really promising guy. He fights at bantamweight. He's a big, big fighter for the division. I just think he should be on most people's radar because this is a world champion level fighter.
I've heard you say good things about this kid. I'll definitely check him out.
He's very, very good. That's our wrap up of the ProBox TV card. I wanted to get to one last thing, which is a fan from our guy. I can't say your name, so
Breon Bren.
Okay, there we go. Do you think Benavidez and Morrell will fight again somewhere down the line? Dakota, why don't you handle this?
I think it's possible. I do think it's possible. And one scenario that I see playing out, this is just me extrapolating a little bit, right? Like if Benavidez were to get a better Beaver, a Bivol fight after their rematch, and he were to lose that, and Morrell were to have a very exciting performance against somebody, whether it was, the winner of Buatsi and Callum Smith, whether it was Anthony Yard, just somebody credible. If you were to pair Benavidez losing to the very best at light heavy with Morrell having some exciting performances, they may wind up needing each other again at some point.
Maybe. It just depends on where the careers go, right? Because like the first loss for many fighters, it shapes how the fans look at a fighter. So now Morrell is no longer the boogeyman.
It
can, right? But I'm saying like Morrell goes from this deep cut boogeyman guy that people are saying is very avoided to now he has to rebuild and take some fights with guys that think they can beat him because they've seen that he's been beaten. And that is an adjustment. And sometimes fighters don't make that leap. Sometimes fighters start to kind of struggle to find that identity. And I say that also with guys who are punchers. That typically happens. And Morrell kind of came to the dance as a very talented boxer, but he's a puncher, devastating puncher. So I think the way they meet again is Morrell finds his identity at light heavyweight because we got to see if the power will be there or if he's going to adapt more of a boxing style, a movement style to be effective there. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But I think that the idea of it happening this year or even next year is kind of out of the realm of possibility. I think that Morrell is going to serve as, I wouldn't say a gatekeeper, but he's going to be the guy that makes sure guys can't get to a title fight. That's the role he's going to serve in the sport, is guys that are ascending, maybe like an Albert Ramirez, Joshua Buatsi. Those type of fighters are guys that I see Morrell fighting, and he has to beat them. And then once he wins enough fights like that, then he probably has to fight Benavidez.
But I think Benavidez is special enough that Morrell will win a lot of those fights. I don't think there's going to be a lot of guys at light heavy that can beat David Morrell. And I think that he will make himself an appealing rematch opponent somewhere there.
And honestly, that would be the best thing possible if Morrell won a belt and went on a win streak, and then they could meet in a rematch. And now there's animosity from the first fight, a lack of experience in the first fight. And now it's a great what if. What if Morrell is now 21-0 or 21-1 or something? And he's fighting Benavidez, who now people wonder, is he a little long in the tooth? Because is Benavidez.
They'll fight at another chapter in their careers.
Yeah, like we're going to see a little bit of gray hair on one of their beards. Like it's not going to be a fresh faced. We're going to see David Benavidez's son really a man in this.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they'll both be in their early to mid 30s when this fight happens, if it happens.
Okay. Yeah. Crawford is way overrated. Canelo is going to smoke him. So Rudy Gomez 212, we appreciate the comment. I just don't think you can say Crawford's overrated because he fought basically the best guys of his era, went out of his way to fight Errol Spence, had a dominant one-side performance against the other title holder in a marquee division, and became the best welterweight since Floyd Mayweather, and won his first world title going overseas to beat Ricky Burns, and made a lot of title defenses against guys who, after they fought Crawford, were never the same, but were number one contenders and distinguished champions.
I think I actually agree somewhat. I would take out the way. I think Crawford is a little bit overrated. And the reason I say that is because when you take the top 10 pound for pound right now and I stack everyone's accomplishments next to each other's, I'm pretty confident his are a lot shorter. And the number of opponents that, are legitimately 50-50 fights are a lot shorter. I actually don't think he fought a lot of the best guys of his time. He didn't fight Thurman. He didn't fight Danny Garcia. There was a lot of other guys that existed in that PBC realm that he didn't get to. Again, some of them he did, but some of them he didn't. And he's an incredible fighter. He's accomplished so much. And in terms of skills and eye test, I could easily myself make the argument he's the most skilled guy out right now. But I think when people default the pound for pound list to him being the number one guy, I just think the 5 fighters below him have better resumes. So it's tough for me, you know what I mean, to put him in that kind of conversation.
Okay, let's talk through this because to me, Usyk is number one. There's no debate. Usyk's number one. You're with me on that?
Yeah, 100%.
So then the conversation becomes, who do you put at number two? Do you put Inoue or Crawford for me?
I mean, I put Beterbiev.
See, for me, that fight was just a little too close for like putting him above the Inoue and Crawford's. I think him and
my
Bivol
justification is I put Bivol 3.
Okay, so that's fair. So I've got Inoue and Crawford above those two, but it's because I'm waiting on this fight because I think there's going to be some separation. So I've got Beterbiev and Bivol at 4 and 5, just because like there wasn't that separation that I was looking for. So no one kind of made the thing, but I get where you're coming from. So
I also don't think Crawford or Inoue have a win as significant as Bivol's win over Canelo. And in the keep what you kill, you know, that's part of why I've continued to keep Bivol so high.
Yeah, he's randomly fallen down people's pound for pound lists. It's
for no fucking reason.
Yeah, no, startling. So who do you put, Inoue or Crawford?
For where?
But so you're third. So you go Usyk, Beterbiev, Bivol. Then do you have Canelo? Do you have Inoue or Crawford?
Then I have Inoue.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then 5 is Crawford.
Yeah.
And then 6, Bam Rodriguez, Nakatani, or Canelo?
6, I go Canelo. 7, I go Bam. And then 8, I go David.
And then 9, Nakatani?
9, I think I have... No, 9, I have Tank. And 10, I have Nakatani.
Okay, that's fine. I just...
And again, if you get into the argument about Tank's, you know, lack of resume, I'm all there with you, bub. I'm given, you know, to some extent, I also factor the eye test in. And so for me, it makes sense to have Tank at number 10.
Yeah. I don't know. Tank's a hard one. Let's just get to the
last. It is a hard one. It is a hard one.
Let's get to the last things, and then we're going to be out, guys. Porter took a dive against Crawford. I mean, you can't say things like this. This is just a emotional statement. To me, it looked very legit, and it looked like Crawford really flipped a switch when he felt like his corner said he was losing the fight.
I mean, it kind of felt like his pops cut the lights out on him early. That was always sort of my issue with that.
Well, I think also that's a father who knows his son really well, and he saw something because, sure. You know, you know, we talk. See, that's another conversation for another day. But we talk about these fathers in boxing. Oh, these fathers are so bad. These fathers are so bad. And then when a father does a rational thing about protecting his son, whether it's Sean Porter's dad, Kenny Porter for that fight, or Jason Papillon last night against Joe Hicks, he saw his son getting hit. We never hear the story about the dad made the right decision. It's always, the dad stepped in. Like, the dads are in probably like the worst spot unless you pitch 1,000, you know?
Yeah, a lot of them are a tough hang though, bub.
Oh, I'd say 70 to 80% are in the rough hang category. Drew Ward Jr. Wow, a calm talk about, I guess we're just too mellow. I guess we're too mellow, bro.
No, I'm taking that as a compliment. I think he understands that so many people in boxing kind of dig in on a position and can't do what we do, Lukie.
Well, this is a knowledge. It's sometimes it's fun to get a dense boxing show, right? It's a little dense. It's going to give you some knowledge, but it's going to give you some tools to go out there and enjoy boxing.
And listen, if our Riz levels get too low, like our friend earlier said, we'll throw in an air horn, right? You know what? Lukie's got a little thing over there. Right. We can do more of that. Is that what the TikTok kids want?
Okay.
And then cat eyes.
Drew Ward said for our pound for pound list, got to add the monster. Kingdom John Doe said Tank. Tank was also added. Zordo Lopez over Tank easily. I guess they're saying Zordo Ramirez and Teofimo Lopez.
I'm not bad at that, brother. Pound for pound is obviously subjective, and Zordo, you know, if you want to talk accomplishments, I think has had tougher wins than Tank has at this point. So I'm not mad at that. My personal opinion at the moment is Tank occupies a number 10 spot, but he's holding on to that by a thread, my friend. So, you know,
I think I'll put Zordo there for me. I think Zordo's earned it, and people don't give him enough credit. And that Bivol win over him, people act like that was a death sentence, and Bivol's a really great fighter. So like Drew Ward, Tank's test results speak for themselves, though. He's a strong fighter. He is a strong
No
fighter.
doubt.
Kingdom John Doe, Devin Haney, pound for pound. Look, he's an exceptional fighter. His fight with Ryan Garcia, there's just a lot of unanswered questions, and he's been too inactive coming off of that weird and kind of ugly pay-per-view fight.
Yeah, just too much waiting around. I had Devin at like number 7 a year and a half ago. You know what I'm saying? I had Devin real high up on my list after the Regis fight. So, is it pound for pound level skill? I think it is, but he hasn't done himself any favors by staying out of the ring this long.
Well, that is the show this week. Dakota, where can people best support you? I think that the show is really picking up steam in 2025. Oh, we got one last thing before you promote yourself. Is Lomachenko done? What do you think, Dakota?
I think he is. But he's also a great fighter. And I think if he's physically capable of fighting and has the will, he can beat anybody at lightweight, frankly.
It's a great one. Maybe this is the guy we forgot. Oscar Collazo. He's beaten the best guys in his division.
I think people overlook in a pound for pound conversation. I think Collazo gets overlooked. I think Daniel Dubois gets overlooked. I think Zordo gets overlooked. I think the great Erislandy Lara, who I continue to have at the 15 spot on my pound for pound list, is constantly overlooked. Why that is, I'm not entirely sure. He's only gotten, it seems like, better and more exciting the older he gets. So I think there's a lot of talent right now. Richardson Hitchens is starting to get into that conversation for me. There's a lot of guys.
Okay, we got to let Dakota go, guys. So we love that you got questions, but he's got to have a day too.
You guys rock, bro. You guys are the best.
For Rudy Gomez, we go live every Sunday on YouTube. The time changes, and then sometimes if it doesn't work out, we go on Monday. In the chat, leave a comment if you see this. Let us know a good time for you on Sundays and Mondays that you guys would like us to go live, and maybe we will cater to your schedule unless we're not capable of doing that. Dakota, tell the people who tuned into this show where they can best support you.
Well, thank you for joining us, as always, if you're new here. And of course, I see some of our regulars here. We always appreciate you guys. The chat is the third host, so that's been incredible. You can always catch me here on the Lukie Boxing Show every Sunday or Monday if we have to finagle. You can catch me on my own show, the Slip and Weave Podcast. Great episode with John Pullman came out this week, Coach John Pullman. And you can catch me at ITR Boxing. So, hell of an episode, Lukie.
Yep, and then just because the last one we'll get to, Jaron Ennis versus Stanionis thoughts. That's a real fight. I'm
leaning Stanionis right now, Bob. I got to be honest, but he also is another one that doesn't fight a lot. So that's a fun one, though. I'm glad it's happening.
So we will be back, and next week, really the next 2 weeks, we're going to be working overtime because we've got some big cards, Top Rank, Keyshawn Davis title fight, and then we have the February 22nd mega card. So the month of February is just going to be a very busy week for us. This is kind of like our, we're getting to chill. We're getting to chill this week, and then we got 2 back-to-back big weeks. I know I'm ready for it. I know you're ready for it. Thank you to the chat, and we will be back next Sunday.